that too loud? Can everybody hear me reasonably or stop? Okay, great. So my name is Rachel Meriwether. I am the head of the horticulture department here at Blue Ridge. I have always been a plant nut. I went to the hospital a couple times as a kid for eating things you shouldn't eat, so I really need to hone my skills as quickly as possible. Always been plants. I didn't know what it was going to be along the way, but that's what all my schooling has been about. Went to the University of Louisiana at Lafayette for research biology and biodiversity, which is like degree for in biology for people who don't want to be doctors. Had a great time playing in the swamps and doing things like that in Louisiana. Have worked in all sorts of fields in horticulture because, again, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just know I wanted to be outside and play with plants. I finally ended up at Auburn University and did my master's work mostly in plant propagation, which remains one of my favorite aspects of plants, is just making more plants. They really fascinate me in terms of their abilities to adjust their bodies or do certain things, or grafting itself is such a bizarre concept. Seed germination, that kind of thing, the things you need to do to make a seed germinate. I'm just completely fascinated by that. Moved up to North Carolina, owned a flower farm for a long time, and then I took over this position about a year and a half ago and just love it. I still get to have my finger in all sorts of areas of horticulture. So again, whether it's yards, farms, greenhouses, houseplants, whatever it is, I am at least curious about it and willing to talk about it. So yeah, does anybody have any questions about that while we let Julia fiddle with the computer a little bit more? Yeah, Nadine.
What are the classes that you provide here?
So in terms of the whole horticulture program, we provide a lot, right? So we provide about 8 classes per semester. They switch between spring and fall, and then we have a couple every summer. I teach anywhere from 3 to 4 of those each semester, and then we have some other adjuncts that are absolutely incredible. And so anything from plant ID to greenhouse production to nursery, field style production. We have a full soils and fertilizers class, so if you want this and expand it into a full semester length, you can do those sorts of things. We also do some continuing ed classes, so even if you don't want to be in full curriculum, you can take some continuing ed with us. I just finished our spring gardening class, and there's a native plant ID class that starts next week. And in the fall, we do floral design, so all kinds of stuff, both within the curriculum as well as continuing ed through the program. And we do, of course, have our big plant sale on Saturday, so anybody who's interested in that, we will be there from 8 to 4, some fun food trucks around noon, and we have some great stuff. The class this year just did an absolutely amazing job, and we have, I think it's 16 types of tomatoes alone, and herbs, and hanging baskets, and ferns, and succulents, and so much stuff. Yes, right here.
Where will that be?
It's at the greenhouse, which I'm going to try to wrap this up a little bit early because we've had a lot of people ask about the greenhouse, and so I figure anybody who can, we're going to take a little field trip and walk up and see the greenhouse itself that's here on campus. We have some really great resources right here on campus that I remain very thankful for and impressed by just in terms of the college itself. Yeah.
I don't think anyone's joining us in our little Zoom room, so you
All
may
right.
proceed, and I'll just be the...
Let's head into the main event. Okay, so I did jot down some notes just so I can keep myself on track since we're doing this in a fairly short format. A really important thing to remember, and what I tell students all the time, is that dirt is inert and soil is alive, right? So dirt is rocks, sand, silt, clay. That is dirt. Dirt sits there, it doesn't do anything. Soil, on the other hand, has humic matter, which usually involves and is what feeds fungi, bacteria, worms, macro and microinvertebrates. Those are the things that you have to have if you are calling what you have soil, right? If it does not have those things, it's not soil, it is dirt. It is an inert substance that is sitting there to hold something up. It still has a purpose, right? There are inert dirts out there that aren't necessarily not what they should be, right? They're sitting there holding up the planet, sort of. It's this crust, right? What we really want, though, in the vast majority, and certainly what any gardener wants, is soil, right? You want something that is a living, functioning organism in some ways, and certainly the complete soil nuts, that's the way they think of it, right? It is a functioning organism almost in and of itself. And there's even some theories and writings that talk about the soil basically as like the planet's immune system. And kind of like we have learned more about our microbiome as humans and how bacteria and things like that keep us healthy. that is the same thing that the layer that is soil around our planet does for our planet. As everything comes from the top, rain, human activity, whatever it is, it filters through this basically immune system layer before it gets back down to things like aquifers and rock layers and things like that. So that's how the earth like breaks things down, right, is this active layer of soil that is fungi, bacteria, earthworms, mixed in with all of these inert substances like rock and stuff like that, right? So, moving into what types of soils you might have somewhere. What it's all about is the ratio between clay, silt, and sand. Sand are the largest and the heaviest. Clay is the next largest and heaviest, and then silt is the teeniest and the smallest, right? So has anyone ever heard of like the jar test that you can do at home? Right, so take a jar of whatever soil's in your yard, you put it in some water and you shake it up, and then you let it sit for 24 to 48 hours, and what is going to happen is those three layers are going to fall out in that level, right? Sand's going to be at the bottom because it's the heaviest, clay is going to be the next level, silt's going to be the next level, and you can get a rough idea of what the breakdown is of your soil just by doing that real quick. You also can assess that through all sorts of other ways. What kind of weeds are growing in your yard? What is already present, right? We have a lot of really wet soils here. So if you have a lot of yellow dock or bulrushes or something like that, there is a water table right underneath your yard right there, right? Do you have a lot of chickweed? Do you have a lot of the little purple lamium that's coming up right now and blooming real pretty? That probably means you have kind of dense soils, right? Because those are really tough plants. You can like push their way through really tough soils and things like that. So you do want to know those things, mostly so you can adjust your soils as necessary to get the most bang for your buck, if you will, right? Because if you have really heavy clay soils, you kind of need to add in something sandy. If you have really sandy soils, opposite direction, right? No matter what soil you have though, especially around here, you're adding compost, right? We here in North Carolina have absolutely incredible mineral properties to our soil. All soil is created by the erosion of rocks and things over time, and we live in some of the oldest mountains in the entire world, if not, I mean, arguably the oldest, depending on who you're talking to. So that means we are ancient, right? We have these really, really old mountains that have been eroding. So that means our soils drain really well, right? Water doesn't sit on the surface for very long. They will hold on to particles pretty well, like in terms of nutrients that are trying to wash through the soil profile, that kind of thing. What it does mean for us is that we have huge erosion problems, right? Because there's not a whole lot of organic matter ever holding everything together. Organic matter is kind of like the glue. So in our climate in particular, you're almost always forcing organic matter in. You will never, ever stop adding organic matter to your gardens in our climate. It's just true, right? We live in a temperate rainforest. And I don't know if anybody remembers all those lessons we all sort of learned, at least when I was sort of in high school, that basically rainforests look really productive because they've got all this stuff going on. But as soon as you take the trees away, that soil is basically dirt, right? There's not a whole lot going on because the trees is what is doing it. So yeah, if you go out into our forest, there's this deep duff layer and it all looks really productive, but as soon as you take those trees away, it's non-productive. There's just not a whole lot of organic matter there whatsoever. So you're always having to add it. The ways you can do that is you can make or buy your own compost, or you can do cover crops, which is green manure, or green compost is what they might call it. And when you're living on a farm, like I did for a while, again, this is something you do multiple times a year, right? At least twice a year, if not more. I know there was a lot of questions about where you can get those things, and we'll talk about that again in just a minute. In terms of also assessing your soil, who here has ever taken a soil sample? Great, we've got a few. Okay, that's excellent. So for anybody who hasn't, right, this is a soil box. You can get these from the Extension office. If you've never been to the Extension office, you should go. It is a free service that your taxes pay for, and every county in the United States has one, and they are ready and willing to answer your questions. So it's got all these instructions on it, right? All this folds into a little box. Right now, these you have to pay a little bit for. If you take these late summer in the fall, you have to pay the shipping, but the results themselves are free. So at least on our farm, we do soil samples. I mean, we'll do like 15 of them in the fall because you send them all in one big box and you get all this stuff. So that brings me to the handout. Soil result sheets can be very overwhelming the first time you see one, right? They are very technical. They are written as such because there are people out there that all this information is perfectly normal for them to look at. I'm going to borrow y'all's for just a second. The most important things for anybody to look at, kind of on this bottom corner right here, it says HM%. That is your humic matter percent. That is your organic matter, right? If you are at about an ideal percent around here, this would be 2 to 5%. On this one you can see it's 0.46%. That is not uncommon in our soils, right? Again, because we have highly mineral soils, which is great. Fantastic, right? Again, water doesn't stand, a lot of nutrient content, really great. But you always, always, always are going to be having to try and up this number, right? I mean, it was like a point of pride on the farm. Every time we get them back each year, it's like, oh yeah, we got it up by 0.2%. Yes, excellent, success. So yes, that number is a number you're going to think about. A lot of these other ones, these sort of micronutrients, zinc, copper, sulfur, all of that, most of the time, you don't need to worry about those, right? If you were doing all the other things we're talking about, adding compost, compost seeds, which again we'll talk about in just a second, all of this should be essentially taking care of itself, right? If you are farming for a profit, you might want to start worrying about this a little more. And the wonders of this modern era is you can consult Google. So if you ever are really confused about a soil test, just Google it, right? It's just incredible. I mean, obviously you have to weed through certain information when you're going to the internet, but for this kind of thing, it does tend to be pretty straightforward, right? You just want to know what it is, what it might do. That is mostly, when I am looking at a regular soil sample, that's mostly what you want. There is usually, let's see, oh yeah, so pH, that's the other big thing. Right underneath test results, you'll see pH. For this one that I've got you guys having, it's a 6.2. Who's familiar with the pH scale? Oh good, we got several of y'all. Okay, so 1 through 14, 1 through 7 is acidic, 7 through 14 is the basic end, with 7 being right in the middle. We tend to have acidic soils in our climate. That's why we have so many azaleas, rhododendrons, mountain laurel, all that kind of thing. Those plants tend to like acidic soils. Your average vegetable garden or home garden, they like a little bit more of a basic soil, right? So 6.2 is getting pretty close to what an average vegetable garden wants. If you have one that's in the like 4 to 5, you will potentially be adding lime, right? Lime is a basic substance, and so when you add lime, it's going to take that number and shift it up towards the 7s, right? That's where you're going with that. Yeah, yeah, of course.
So for veggies, you want 4 to 6?
4 to 6 is the acidic stuff.
Oh, okay.
Blueberries, azaleas, rhododendrons, that kind of thing in our climate. That's what they really like, which is why they grow so well in the wild in our climate, in our land.
And veggies?
So veggies are going to like more of this sort of 6 and 7s. Yeah, they like it kind of right in the middle. And all of this, without going into too much of the science, again, we talk about this a lot in the other classes, a lot of this has to do with when nutrients are available, right? This is the chemistry, it's the Legos that make up our world. And so it's certain pHs, which is essentially whether or not hydrogen is free, and hydrogen is the thing that like locks to all of the other positively charged nutrients in soil. Calcium is a +2, and zinc is a +1, and so you want that hydrogen to grab onto these nutrients, and then it locks itself to the soil, and so that's what that is telling you. I mean, you don't need to know all of that, right? But that is, at certain pHs, certain nutrients just aren't available because the soil can't hold on to it. It's like, well, that's just floating away, right? It's washing out with the rain or going wherever it's going. If you have certain pHs, it's like the soil can snatch it, hold on to it, chemically speaking, right? So yeah, that pH is also important. The other thing you might see, and of course they do have it on these, is right over here there's a phosphorus index, which this one is actually in optimum range, which is great. That tended to be a nutrient that's actually pretty low in our soils. Again, that has to do with them just being very old. Phosphorus so those 3 numbers you see on a fertilizer bag, right, are N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Nitrogen's the green and growing. If you ever look at a Miracle Grow bag, for instance, it's like 5200. Yeah, they're just like pumping plants full of nitrogen, makes them real big and real green. Nitrogen's the get growing. Phosphorus is the bloom and fruit nutrient, right? So bone meal, rock phosphate are the ways you can organically add those things to your soil. Those are usually going to be something like a 2-12-2 or something like that. And so you're boosting the ability for your plants to fruit and bloom. I get a lot of phone calls about that, where it's like, my plants look really healthy and they look fine in my garden, but they're not blooming, or maybe the tomatoes bloom and then they never make fruit. Well, if they don't have enough phosphorus, they just won't ever, right? They'll just sit there happily living their life, as green as you can be and healthy, but they're just never going to make a fruit because they're like, I don't have the vitamins for that, so I'm not going to bother. That's too much work. Yeah. So phosphorus is important. Potassium off on the end is kind of a general important thing, but a little less focused than the nitrogen and phosphorus that are right there at the beginning. All right, any questions about that? I know I'm going kind of fast, but again, soils are a big topic, and I know we want to go play in the greenhouse and see everything. Okay, so soil samples are important. Again, it's free data that you can get in the fall, so why not? That being said, this is a chemical breakdown of your soils. This is not giving you the same information that you're going to get by visually going out, looking at your soils, touching them, feeling them. Again, what kind of plants are already present in that profile, because what soil you have is definitely going to be affected by, what weeds and other plants are already growing there is definitely going to be affected by what soils you already have present. Okay, let's see, where was I going next? All right, let's go into cover crops and compost and compostees, because I know that is a huge part of any garden. I know cover crops are a little less for people that are ornamental gardeners, right? Because your garden stays in place, you don't take it out all the time. If you are, on the other hand, doing any sort of veggie garden or something that's going to turn over annually, a cover crop is a really great idea. Nature almost never leaves bare soil, right? Nature does not, only in a disaster. If there is a fire, a flood, a tree falling over, those are the only times that nature ever allows there to be bare soil. And even then, it's only very briefly. And then there are pioneer species that are going to germinate and they're going to fill in that space as quickly as possible, because bare soil is, one, going to erode away very quickly. Rainfall on bare soil is really impactful. Raindrops seem small to us, but every time they hit the soil, they're actually knocking air out of the soil. So again, nature doesn't want that. They don't want bare soils. And B, there's nothing to eat for any of the soil microorganisms. So the longer you have bare soil, the more all of those little things are like, I'm not gonna live here. Like, I'm gonna go over there where there's actually something to eat and where I have something to interact with. And so bare soil is almost never a good idea. Sure, every now and then, if you have some sort of soil disease or a pathogen that maybe you need to deal with, fine. You might make bare soil. Otherwise, almost never. I mean, even big commercial farms now are doing like undercropping, right? So right before their big main crop's about to come out, they'll seed a cover crop underneath. So as soon as they harvest their main cash crop, the cover crop comes in. So we get no bare soil. We're never allowing bare soil to come in. Or if it's the other direction and you have a spring cover crop, they'll do things like crush it down with these big presses, so the cover crop's laid down flat, and then they drill in the cash crop straight into it, so that the cover crop is basically choking out weeds, it's never going away, it rots straight into the ground, so again, you're green manuring your fields. All of it can be done even on a home scale. We're not going to go into all the specific cover crops because there are a lot of them out there. I will say for our area, if you look up winter wheat, red clover, and like Austrian winter peas or vetch. Those are going to be, that's one of my favorite combos, right? Winter rye kills other plants or stops them from germinating, basically. I know, just as a fun, like SAT word, not that any of us have to take that anymore, but allelopathic plants release a chemical into the soil that stops other plants from germinating. Black walnuts are kind of famous for this too, right? If you plant a black walnut and nothing else will really grow, well, black walnuts release this chemical called juglone. And juglone is an allelopathic chemical and stops other things from germinating, which sometimes is terrible, but in a farm, you're basically using a natural pre-emergent, right? Is you put this thing out there, and if you have winter wheat growing all winter long, and then right in the spring, when it thinks it's gonna get to drop seed, you cut it down, It releases all that chemical into the soil and stops anything you don't want from germinating,
You mean
Right.
right?
Yeah, right, thank you. Yeah, winter rye. Austrian peas or vetch, those are in the allium, or I'm sorry, legume family. I don't know why I said allium, that's onions and stuff. The legumes, they are nitrogen fixers, right? So all of that sort of stuff is actively fertilizing your soil also by having these symbiotic relationships in your soil and taking nitrogen that would otherwise be unavailable to plants and chemically morphing it into a form of nitrogen that is available to your plants. All of those are just fabulous, and red clover is another one of those, right, in that same legume family, and they're really beautiful. I love red clover, it's one of my favorites. Some blend with that. So True Seed sells a pretty great cover crop blend. I'm not sure if Eden Brothers does in terms of our local seed companies. The Seed Savers Exchange, they're another really amazing seed company, and they do a couple of other of those blends, right? So you don't necessarily have to do it yourself. You can buy a winter cover crop blend or a spring cover crop blend, that kind of thing. Any questions about cover crops? Yeah, right here.
Yeah, if you've got a cover, we've got a cover crop on part of
Okay.
our yard at this point, some kind of peas.
Austrian.
Austrian peas, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great one.
So they're big plants. Now we want to plant something there. What, we just mush them down? We don't till them under or?
You can, yeah, either is an option.
Okay.
Right, it kind of depends on whether you want to till. So the term they would use in farming is crimping, right? They either have ones that attach to a tractor or they have these ones you step on with your foot. And you're essentially doing what you don't want the wind to do to your crops, which is knocking them all the way over where they never come back up, right? So you're knocking that cover crop down to the point where you're breaking the stems a little bit and then you're squishing it so that it lays down flat and becomes essentially like a weed mat that's down. Or you absolutely can mow it and then till it in, right? That is an equally reasonable way to get a cover crop to stop before it drops seed. Yeah. It kind of depends on your space, what equipment you have, how you want to do it. I feel like it is the most frustrating thing we plant people always say, but it kind of depends, right? Like, that is the answer, I feel like, so often to any question you might ask a plant person is, well, it kind of depends. And on a farm, it's almost always a different story depending on who you are and where you are, right? Which thing worked for you, which thing worked best for your soils, which thing worked best for the crop you want to follow, that cover crop, all of it.
One more bit. We have a rototiller, and lately I've been reading things that said don't rototill your soil because it destroys the
Sure.
structure of it.
And we'll talk about that in just a
With the
second.
cover crop, you do rototill, you don't rototill, you rototill shallowly.
I mean, again, it's your personal choice. If you're
Yeah.
doing a no-till garden, then you're definitely not rototilling it,
Yeah.
right? And there are some arguments for no-till in terms of mostly it has to do with like fungi and things in the soil, right? And
The worms don't like it much.
And they don't like it, right? It's loud, it disrupts their world, and so it isn't necessarily gonna destroy those systems entirely, it just slows them down, right? You've had them in there all winter in your cover crop, building all these networks, and there's mycelium growing like crazy in there, and there's all these little creatures with all their tunnels and everything, and then you take a piece of equipment across and you rip it all apart, right? And
Good.
the mycelium won't die, you know, they're not gonna die, you've now busted them up. And so now they have to like take all that time to reconnect themselves. And so it's really up to you, like which one you wanna do. They will repair themselves and they'll come back. And
Well, I just want to know what you need to do if you're going to find vegetables in that dirt.
straight into it, I mean, the other thing you can always do depending on the size is you can do one of those like solarizations, right? So a tarp or just really deep leaf cover like this, or cardboard boxes if you can get a hold of those, and then you just lay the whole thing over your cover crop and you leave it there for 3 weeks and you let all that stuff die and then you pull it right back off. And
Good, I
yeah,
like that. Good.
and then it just dies. Yeah. Yeah, Rob.
I had some experience with the cover cropping the last few years, and the legumes, all you gotta do is just cut them off at ground level, and they won't come back generally. But if you plant the winter rye, it will come back, so then you'll have to till. So that's one thing you gotta watch out for.
Yeah.
And if you can avoid tilling, it's good because you've got all that root matter still where it wants to be,
Perfect
and it
sense,
creates
yeah.
drainage and all that.
Yeah, a huge thing with any cover crop is not letting it go to seed,
Oh, yeah.
right? Do not let it go to seed, because you're basically seeding weeds. A weed is a plant in a place you don't want it. So, right, a cover crop in the wrong place is a weed. When it's a cover crop, it's a cover crop, and that's what you're doing on purpose. As soon as you let it go to seed, then suddenly, yeah, you've just created a weed profile for yourself that is really hard to deal with. And yes, the winter rye in particular are weeds. Once their seed is in your soil profile, you'll have it popping up for the next 4 years. It's very challenging to get rid of. Buckwheat is one of our really common summer cover crops. It comes up real fast, flowers a lot, the bees and pollinators absolutely love it. But that in particular, same thing. If you let that go to seed, they have these really sharp, hard seeds that are incredibly good at surviving long term. So it'll sit there, and anytime you do turn over your soil, it could be like 10 years later, suddenly you're gonna get a crop of buckwheat that's gonna pop up out of your soil. Yeah, just management like anything else, right? A cover crop is just a plant that you're utilizing as a tool, and so, again, the internet is an amazing thing. It can provide you so much information about any of these cover crops, and some of them are absolutely stunning, right? Anybody who's ever seen photos of like wine country in California, and there's those yellow fields that they have in the fall or spring, that is some sort of brassica cover crop, right? Probably like rapeseed, or maybe it's some sort of kale or something like that, but that's what that is, right? Is they're, letting those roots drill down, and so like Rob's talking about, they're putting that root matter in there, which is what microorganisms are gonna eat. It allows water to penetrate into the soil profile. But all the brassicas actually also release some chemicals into the soil that help restrict bacteria that you don't want. So yeah, they're a good cover crop option also. And you can eat those, which is pretty fun. Yeah. Okay, so jumping from cover crops to compost, which is the other big thing you're gonna add to your soil. Composting in and of itself, again, I'm not gonna go too much into that. What I will say is composting can be as complicated or as simple as you wanna make it. Right? If you're gonna do hot, fast compost piles, those take a lot of work and attention. You can have finished compost within 2 weeks, but what you're doing is you are flipping it once or twice a day. You probably got a thermometer that you're taking temperature, you're watering it, you have exactly the right ratio of greens and browns, and you're paying attention to it, and you've already got mushrooms and bacteria and worms in there, and everything's really active, and you're paying attention to it all the time. I have never once in my professional career had time for that. Not once. The only time I've ever been involved in that level of composting was in grad school, when somebody was like studying compost to do these certain methods. There are absolutely farms that do it, right? They do. They have the time, the energy, the equipment, whatever it is. What we do here on campus, and what I've always done on the farms I worked on, is essentially cold composting, right? You are trying to keep a good blend of your greens and browns, which are these big categories of like, brown stuff, as you can think of it as dry things. It is newspaper, cardboard, sawdust, wood chips, all of that kind of thing that is more carbon-based. Then all your green stuff is your heavy nitrogen, so that's gonna be grass clippings, weeds from your garden, leftover food from your house, all of that sort of thing. You're looking for a balance of those two. So your greens and browns, try and keep that balance, try and keep it relatively damp, and flip it when you have the time, right? That's, yeah.
On the internet, I've read everything from 80-20, 80 brown, 20
Sure.
green, 80 green, 20 brown, 50-50. Oh, it's so confusing.
So some of that has to do with your climate, right? If you live in the tropics, or even Florida or Louisiana, you need a little bit more brown stuff because your climate is very damp, and everything's just cooking faster and more often. Right, and so you need it to be a little more brown. Up here, we can add a little bit more greens because we need to, think of the green stuff as like the heat, right? When you add the green stuff in, it makes it a little juicier and it kind of like speeds everything up. The carbon-based stuff kind of sits there, right? But it keeps it from getting anaerobic. If you have nothing but green stuff, essentially what you're doing is you're making it too wet and there's no oxygen in there. And so everything's suffocating, right? And it'll smell bad. If your compost smells bad, it is not working like it should. Obviously, it's gonna smell like compost, right? It doesn't smell like roses or anything, but if it smells like rot or something dead, that is not good. That means you've started, anaerobic is no oxygen, right? In the absence of oxygen. And so the top of the pile might look fine, but if you dig into the middle of the pile, it'll look almost black and kind of slimy, and there might be like a layer of white where the mushrooms are trying to live. It's like there's a layer of mycelium up at the top, and they're trying to get in there, but it's too damp, and there's not enough oxygen in there. So around here, we can cut back on our greens just a little bit because it just cooks a little bit slower and that sort of thing, right? So, and it depends, just a little bit.
And when do you know you can put it in the garden?
So it's about sifting, and we can talk about this more too up at our big compost piles. Again, unless you're doing a hot compost and you're flipping it a lot so everything's deteriorating at the same speed, our finished piles still have some chunks in it,
Okay.
right? So we sift it. You take the chunks and you put them in the unfinished pile so it can keep evolving. But by the time compost is done, you shouldn't be able to tell what's in it, right? You don't see leaves anymore. You don't see wood chips. You don't see food from your kitchen. It's all broken down into this beautiful, really dark, juicy fabulousness.
Gold.
Right, yes, garden gold. It's so good. And there's all those things you're fighting so hard to grow in your soil in concentrate, is basically what it is, right? It's worms, worm eggs, mycelium from mushrooms, all those good guy bacteria, who knows what other little microinvertebrates, and then you're just putting them straight into your garden and off they go, living their best life, right?
So worms will be in the compost pile?
Ideally, yeah.
We've got a rotary compost,
So you would have to add them,
yeah. that's
right?
what I
Which,
thought.
so Rob gave us, our program, actually, a little worm tower, and we're hoping to use that to, if you will, inoculate our compost pile. They're still living in the building because it's a little cold outside, and I'm just babying them still a little. But as soon as it's warm enough, they're moving out there by the garden, and we're gonna start adding them to the compost pile. And when you have a good, healthy, active compost pile, you should just visibly see worms, and you certainly should be finding worm eggs.
And it feels so good.
It feels so good.
Yeah.
It's just this crumbly perfectness, right? It is. It's just amazing what real compost looks like. It
And you
smells
thank every
good.
little worm there.
Yeah, yeah. Even kids get into it. When our last farm, we did a lot of school field trips, and I never would have thought that the compost was going to be the thing. And we would sit there, I mean, for like 30, 40 minutes. The kids would collect them and like have names for every single worm, and the eggs, and they just got super into it. Like, great. I'm glad y'all are into this because I am too. Yes, worms. I mean, the three big decomposers of our world are bacteria, fungi, and worms. They are the things that take all that stuff, they chew it up, they do some amazing chemistry, and then they break it down into what you actually want. I mean, worms in particular, there's still something that scientists are kind of like how can they eat something and then poop it out and have it be more nutritious than when it went in? Yeah, they perform some miraculous things, basically. They also are the thing that are allowing air and water to penetrate into your soil. You can do that with soil roots, but worms actively do it for you, right? They're out there working all the time, doing their thing. So, I mean, our little garden space, again, we'll go up there and see it at the greenhouse. We just converted it from turf last semester, and I saw one worm this year when I was putting in the veggies, and it felt like such a triumph, right? Because when we ripped that turf out, a turf is a plant desert. Right, there's just nothing to eat there. I mean, even if you have some soil microorganisms that have wandered in, it's like you're feeding them nothing but unflavored tofu. Right, it's just like not all that nutritious, it's not yummy, it's not interesting, like they just have zero interest in it, right? Turf is very boring for any of those soil creatures down there. They're just gonna go somewhere else. They're like, nah, nothing to eat here, I'm leaving. I don't want anything to do with it because it's boring. They want interest, right? So the more stuff you can add to a compost pile too, the better it is. If you can get coffee grounds or a lot of stuff from the breweries, we have so many breweries around here, but I will say, and I can go ahead, that there have been questions about like, where do you find compost? It's hard to find manure. Well, that's because it's a hot commodity, right? Like you are competing against some really big farms that they want any horse manure, any of those spent grains from breweries, all of that kind of thing. So it's not that it's not available because it's not there. It's not available because somebody already got it, right? Like they want it, and those big farms already have pickup delivery days and things like that. So just know that that's part of the problem is like you're actively competing with some people that want it professionally, and they already have arrangements. They come and get it once a month or something like that. So making your own compost is a great idea, right? Okay, any questions about compost? Yeah, right here.
So at the farmer's market,
Yeah.
there's a farmer that sells castings?
Oh yeah, worm castings.
What is the role of castings?
So worm castings is worm poop,
Right.
right? So it is compost worms have made, is essentially what the way you.
Just compost.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically because you're feeding worms stuff, and then the stuff that comes out of the bottom of these big tubs or whatever they're growing it in is worm compost, worm created compost.
So treat it like compost.
Yeah, you would add it in where you can. I mean, if you're buying castings, you're probably spending a little more money than for just standard bag compost, so you might want to like focus it on things you like the most. Or if it's castings that are pretty fresh, it potentially already has worm eggs in it. So you could get a bag of castings and put it into your compost pile, and then you're inoculating your compost pile. For anybody, I'm not going to try and open it on a computer right now, but worm eggs are these kind of golden, liquidy looking little sacs, right? They're tiny, right? Maybe not teeny tiny, but the end of a pin, right? Not like a pointy pin, but the end of a writing pin. They're not very big. You can hold one kind of in the middle of your hands. It'll almost look like pre-added fertilizer. That's what I think they look like. Those little round bits that you find in soil, that is a worm egg, if you ever find one. It looks kind of liquidy, like it's see-through almost. If you were to squeeze one, which you shouldn't, it'll like burst in your hand and it's kind of liquid on the inside. That's a worm egg. Once they hatch out, they're these little, they just look like white nothing, right? The golden ones are the ones that are active and they have something inside. You should Google them, worm eggs. Fascinating.
Is there a special kind of worm that is better, or any kind of worms?
I mean, on some level, any kind of worms, right? There are these flathead worms right now that are invasive, so that's kind of an exception to the rule. But if we're talking about, you know, is it a night crawler, is it this or that? Red wigglers, I mean, any worm is better than no worm. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Rob. Rob raises a lot of worms.
I raise a lot of worms, thousands of worms, and just for use, you know, creating the garden gold, and I use the red wigglers, because they eat so much more than their own weight in a single day. It's incredible. They make short work of whatever you put in with them.
And you can easily make your own little, I mean, I live in a little house and I made my own little worm farm.
Yeah, plastic bin.
Yeah.
Just put some shredded paper or some kind of organic material, crunched up leaves or whatever, and throw your kitchen trash in there, and they'll take care of it for you in short order.
Oh yes, ours just got a bunch of grapes that had gone bad in the bottom of my fridge, and they are all happily eating the grapes right now in our worm tower in the classroom. Yeah, Nadine.
Last time you were here, we were talking about manure.
Yeah.
And I volunteer on a goat farm, and I brought some manure home. And I'm doing it 3 different ways. I've raised beds, so I'm doing it 3 different beds, 3 different ways.
Nice.
One without the manure, one with the manure, and one with the manure in water with some of my worms.
Oh, okay. So and that brings me into the next thing I was going to talk about, quite frankly, is you're essentially making compost tea, right? So compost tea is another thing that you can make as complicated as you want. I personally think that most compost teas you buy in a bottle from a store are just a teeny bit of a scam. Not a full scam, but compost tea, and the point of compost tea is that it again is alive, right? There is living bacteria, fungi in that water, and if you take that water and you seal it in a bottle, which means you probably pasteurized it, otherwise it's going to be reacting in there and the bottle's going to explode on the shelf, you have stopped growth in there, right? They are no longer respirating. There is no longer bacteria and fungi respirating inside the bottle, which means they are not alive anymore, right? Which is the whole point of putting compost tea, is to inoculate your soil with all of these living organisms that you want to be in there. So, that being said, you should make your own. If you want to make your own compost tea, you make it, it's exactly what it sounds like, right? You take some compost. If you want to put it in some muslin or something, like a tea bag, put it in some muslin or something in a tea bag, and you take that and you drop it in some water. You can either just let it sit there for a few days. If you want to get really complicated, you can buy a bubbler, like you have in a bathtub or a fish tank or something. You put a bubbler in there because you're giving those creatures in their oxygen. They're going to grow faster if they have oxygen, right? And if it's really active, you'll have this foam The kind of foam you don't want to swim in the river is the kind of foam you want on your compost tea, which again means there's all these creatures in there actively living and respirating. That's what you want, is that stuff in there to go into your soil, and then suddenly, again, you're inoculating your soil with fungi and bacteria. Not the worms, because worms don't live in water, but you're getting all the other stuff, right? So that is compost tea. And it sounds like that's what you're making.
Yeah, actually, I got a bucket from Home Depot, you know, the big tall bucket ones, the orange ones? Yeah.
Yeah.
And some cheesecloth, and put a stick in between, tied a knot,
Perfect.
and then it just sits.
Yeah? Yeah.
And I just scoop it out when I want to.
Yeah, perfect. That's compost tea, right? It's a great way to essentially extend the life of your compost to some extent, because then you can take the compost and just put it back in the compost pile, right? And then the compost tea gets poured onto stuff. The other big benefit of compost tea is you can foliar feed with it. So if you have a plant that is particularly blah or something like that, if you spray it on the leaf surface, plants uptake things from their leaves, and it's like you're giving it a vitamin shot real fast. So you can foliar feed with compost teas, which you can't obviously do with solid compost. That just goes into your soil profile.
Is there a minimal that you should do that? Like
You
a
mean
couple spray-
timing wise?
Yeah.
I would spray till wet. Right, so, I know that sounds, but like, until it's dripping a little bit, right? Make sure the whole plant's a little bit damp and dripping just a tiny bit, and then it's actively uptaking all of that. So compost tea is just a faster vitamin than regular compost that is in the soil and being broken down and all of that sort of thing, whereas compost tea is immediately readily available, right? Given to your plants real fast.
Sorry, I have
No,
another
go
question
ahead.
about manure.
Yeah.
I told you last time I saw you,
Sure.
lots of manure.
Hey, manure is a great and wonderful thing.
So, after I spoke to you, I bought a bunch, or went back from the farm, and I put some in some of the soil I was creating, and some I still have, because I'm not sure how long, there's no plants yet, but how long it will break down, because it was so fresh when I got it.
So some of that will depend on how active your soil already is. So if it's a really active soil and you have a lot of fungi, bacteria, worms, they're gonna break it down faster than a soil that doesn't have as much in it, right? And I could show you all a little bit of, we have a high tunnel up at our greenhouse that has dirt, not soil. And so anything we put in there, it just sits there, right? It never breaks down. Whereas in a really active soil, even if you mix in leaves and things like that, they're gonna get eaten relatively quickly, because
Okay.
it's like you almost have compost in your garden,
Right,
if you will, right? So it kind of depends. The big thing I would say to you is because you're using goat manure. Goat manure is already relatively balanced, so you can probably put plants in there right away if you're not going to eat them raw, right? That would be the biggest thing I would worry about. So I wouldn't put lettuces in it right away. I wouldn't
Okay.
put tomatoes right away. But if you're going to put in squashes, or I mean, it's going to get to 33 on Sunday, so nobody put squash out yet. But if you're gonna put something in there that you're not gonna eat raw or right away, then it doesn't matter, right? Even legally speaking, if you put raw manure onto a farm field, it's 180 days between application of raw manure and harvest for things that are ready to eat. That's the standard for how long it takes those kinds of dangerous bacteria to break down. The other thing that you worry about with manures in particular is burning your plants by putting too much of a certain nutrient, most commonly nitrogen, on them. If anybody's ever put Miracle-Gro or too much nitrogen on a plant, they call it burning, because essentially the edges of the leaves crisp up. You're like, giving it too much, it's like, I got it. It's too much. Chicken manure will do that. Chicken manure, bird manures, any of those are extremely high in nitrogen. You cannot put raw, straight chicken manure onto plants. You need to compost that, or at least mix it with something else. Goat, rabbit, horse, cow, all of those are more balanced. Rabbit being the most balanced, right? The big thing too with certainly like pig, chicken, is pigs and chickens carry zoonotic diseases, meaning they carry diseases that humans can get. So you don't want to use their manure right away, or unless it's been composted, because they carry diseases that you can get. That's a big, rabbits, cows, horses, they don't usually, at least not in our country, really. We we don't really have any horse-borne diseases that humans get.
Okay, let's talk about livestock field.
Yeah, sure.
So a field that was overfarmed,
Okay.
too many livestock on the field, heavy manure buildup, round bales of hay left that have started to decompose and are covered with greenery. So now trying to level that field and turning it, and it's almost black soil with the hay and will not dry. It's almost like slick. How do you handle that?
I
What would be
mean,
the first step?
without looking at it, I would also have some questions about, like, is it wet normally,
No.
right? Because, so do you see any of the rushes, the real green spiky plants that are round? Look up rushes. If you have rushes, that means you have a water table that's really close to the surface, which is not uncommon. The place I live right now, we have that, right? And it's like,
Right.
it's always gonna be damp right there. I mean, depending on how long you can wait, you sound very set up for cover crop land,
Okay.
right?
I'm concerned with putting more livestock on it with the current. Your foot will
Yeah,
sink.
I mean, I would think that you would need to worry about things like pest worms, right? Worms that your animals are gonna get, because there's gonna be a lot of fly eggs and all that kind of thing in that kind of mucky soil like that. So unless you can like bring in sand or something like that to like help balance some of that, otherwise start cover cropping. Because they are gonna help balance it a little bit. I mean, honestly, for what it's worth, I would rather start from where you're at, from completely denuded soils, right? It's like you've already got this really juicy, good stuff. You basically just need to add in some browns to make it less juicy, and that's a little bit easier than going the opposite direction. Doesn't mean it's not still something you have to deal with, but just for what it's worth.
And would you start here with the soil? sample?
Absolutely, yeah. And this is a small talk, I have some business cards, y'all can ask me all the questions, but I cannot stress enough how useful the extension service can be, right? They will drive out to your farm, right? Steve Pettis, who just left, like that is his job, is to have citizens walk in and answer their questions and help them. Like again, you pay for it every time you pay taxes, so it's a service you're already paying for. Might as well access it.
Sounds like a fun challenge, actually.
Yeah, right, how many acres? I
We
guess
have
I'm the other.
16, but this one's like 1 acre, 2 acre plot, and
Mhm.
it's really,
Well, it's probably pretty heavily compacted, right? That's the other thing, is like oxygen in soil is very important, which is why there's all these rules about not walking on your garden beds, right? Particularly after the rain and stuff like that, because you need oxygen in your soils. Once they're fully compacted, nothing can live in there because roots need oxygen. So if they're fully saturated like that, and cows and whatever have been walking on them, there's probably not much aeration in your soil. So either bringing in an aerator, which is another piece of equipment, and you probably have to rent, or again, you let a cover crop do it for you, right? So like tillage radishes is one of the things we have up there. Alfalfa is actually a cover crop that you use pretty regularly, even though it normally turns into food, but alfalfa is like a type of clover, right? But it has huge deep tap roots that go down really, really deep, and as long as you cut it before it sets seed. But email me, we can talk to you more about it, because it sounds fascinating.
It sounds fun, yeah.
Yeah, sounds like a fun challenge. And I'm originally from South Louisiana, so we do regularly deal with saturated, juicy soils. You're like, how do you make anything grow in here without just suffocating and dying? Yeah. But it sounds like you probably have some amazing nutrition in there if you could just balance out the soil profile. Yeah. Okay, any questions about any of that? Let me check my notes, see if I have anything else. No, I think I said everything. Bone meal, rock phosphate, macroinvertebrates, fungi. I did bring a couple of books. I know we're in a library and I'm a book nut in myself. These are two of my favorites. This guy, Gene Logsdon, is fairly famous in the agriculture world in terms of the books he wrote. He's all about a lot of the stuff we've been talking about in terms of cover crops, compost, things like that, how to build soil without machinery and that kind of thing. And then this one is a really accessible read. This is actually the one we use for our soils and fertilizer class here at school.
Is that it over there?
I wouldn't be surprised. I definitely put it on the
And we
list
have
of
library books over there,
recommendations.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rachel, help us on the list.
So either one of these, you can come take pictures up here in a second, but in terms of like future reading, I love both of these. Like I said before though, we do a whole class on soils, right? Soils is a huge topic. It is a never-ending process too. For anybody who's been a gardener long enough, you never stop dealing with your soil, right? And if your soil is the thing that's healthy, you don't have to work as hard on the top part, right? If your soils are doing what they're supposed to do and your plants are getting the proper nutrition and you have all these things hatching and living like they're supposed to in the soil, that even helps with some of your pest control. And so if you're feeding your soil and your soil is really healthy, then your plants are gonna take care of themselves much more than if basically you have this inert substance that's just supporting your plant, and then you're putting in all of these outside influences to keep this top part alive, right? All of this down here is what you really want, and then up here is like the bonus up on top, right? It's definitely the part you want, but if you have all this down here taken care of, you don't have to work nearly as hard for this part up here, which is why we have so many inputs go into some of our really big farming industries, because same thing, like if you have any sort of monocrop, which again is what a lawn is, that's really boring. It's not edible, it's not interesting to microinvertebrates and all that stuff that keeps it alive. So a lot of really big monocrop fields, that's essentially again what it is. It's this inert substance that's acting as a support, so it's holding the plant upright, but it's not giving it anything, right? It's just holding it there, and then you're putting stuff onto it to try and make it get what you want. And even in that setting, when you pour fertilizer or anything onto a plant that's in that kind of soil that can't, again, snatch onto nutrients that we were talking about, your plants are only getting like, I don't know, maybe 10% of the fertilizer you put on them. All the rest is flushing straight through the soil profile and going away. It's sort of like if you ever take a vitamin and then your pee is really yellow, that's because your body can't hold on to all of it. It's like flushing half of it out because you put in more vitamin than your body can absorb in the period of time. Exact same thing happens with most conventional or liquid fertilizers. If you pour it on a plant, particularly if it doesn't have really alive soils, most of that fertilizer just straight gone. Like, plant can only grab so much, and then it just flushes out into the water table, basically. Yeah. So, soils are very, very, very important. Yeah.
You wanted to start a small-scale permaculture.
Sure.
Where are some of the local sources for these ones?
What was the question?
I don't want to just throw Rob under the bus or anything, but I mean, no matter where you are on the internet, right? Like you can get red wigglers off the internet. I don't know if Rob's willing to share his worms, but I don't know of anywhere in Hendersonville that you can just buy worms. I'm pretty sure you can get worms at
Yucky
fifth
ones
season.
at Walmart,
Yeah.
but I went up to
For
Black Mountain
fishing?
and got, some red wigglers.
Yeah, and exactly. Fishing worms are the same thing,
Oh,
right? If there's anywhere that sells fishing worms, this is a worm,
okay.
just because they're destined for fish.
How many do you need to get started?
A handful.
4?
Yeah, a handful.
You could come
Yeah.
dig them out of my yard.
Yeah. I mean, Rob started us off basically with a bundle, and they are actively proliferating themselves in there within, when did you give that thing to us? Maybe 2 months ago?
Yeah, about 2 months ago.
Something, and they're happily living their life.
So this is the tower.
The tower's actually still in the building right here by my office, but we'll look at the main compost piles up in the
15 years.
greenhouse.
I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, Rob's got some great work stuff going on. Yeah, right here.
How do we find out about the continuing education courses that you teach?
Oh, good question. So we have hard copy class magazines that go out. If you sign up for their listings, they'll mail them to you each semester. If you go onto our main Blue Ridge website, I'm trying to remember which heading.
Yeah, because I
It's hard to find.
went on the website and I was having a really hard time navigating.
Where did I bring? I did bring my laptop. Of course I did. Can't lose that. Got to account for everything you buy. You know, can't lose the receipts.
Librarians, success. I said librarians, success.
I have a couple of our catalog, continuing education catalogs. I only have two, but you can also go over to to the sink building over there, and there are sink, yeah, it's, you can see straight through, it's like, right there.
SYNC or
SINK.
From our main page though, the main Blue Ridge page, over on the top bar, it says community. Under community is continuing education. I'm not sure that you can search by my name, but almost all of my classes are under the special interest category.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good.
And there's certificate programs too, which I personally have questions about. And I don't know what,
Did it get into the summer, or is it just spring and fall?
As of right now, we're just doing spring and fall, but we'll move into summer. And you always can take our curriculum classes.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, I mean, you have to apply like a student, but we still have free college right now. So, you know, the application process isn't, it's not like a university where you gotta write essays and what have you. It's fill out form, and then you can take our curriculum classes. And if you don't care about making a really great grade and you tell me that, then we can make sure your tests are graded appropriately. Yeah.
Got fun
You're
seeing
being-
your good
Yeah,
work.
right? I mean, we have a few students like that in our classes. I think between me, a second language, and pottery, we get the most community members taking our classes because of free college, right? That's the thing where you're like, well, if I don't have to pay for it, obviously I want to take a class in pottery or plant propagation. So I in my program already have a few people that they've signed up for a curriculum class because they do want to take the whole thing and they want to learn everything that we are teaching, and you can take it for free right now.
So this native plant one that's coming up, how?
That one's just 2 days. So I think it's next Wednesday and the Wednesday after that. Con Ed or short format, right, as opposed to
Oh, okay, okay.
a full curriculum
I hear you.
class.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, Becky.
So when I checked into some of the classes before, the continuing education classes are not the ones that they provide the free funds for, right?
Correct.
So it's,
Curriculum classes is free college.
okay, I just
Con
wanted
Ed is
to.
a whole other thing, right, because you can teach a Con Ed class, Rob could teach a whole Con Ed class on vermiculture. Anybody can walk through the door and offer a class, and so it's not like, as faculty, I do those almost just on the side because I enjoy it, right? They're very different than,
Okay,
I mean, it is through the college, but it's not nearly the same as curriculum.
gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So yes, you still have to pay the $70 or $50 or
Yeah.
whatever for whatever a Con Ed class
And the
is.
free is free for everyone?
Is for
or-
curriculum.
But
yeah.
for everyone?
I mean, I think there's a few exceptions.
There's
I'm not
not many.
in, but there's not many, right? I mean, I think if you already have a PhD, maybe they're like, no, right? Like, we need to save this for somebody else, but they're very, very few.
I've never heard of.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, we got a huge grant a couple of semesters ago, and as of right now, yeah, free college. Brighter Futures scholarships is what they call them, and yeah, it's a really great thing, and they extended it through fall as of right now. So yeah, organic crop production and viticulture is this summer if you want to take a curriculum class. Yeah, they should be fun. We're gonna take a lot of field trips to vineyards. Is there so many around here now? I don't know if anybody's ever been, but like, now that we're an American viticulture area, which is kind of a big deal for vineyards and what they can produce and all that, they're just proliferating left and right. So yeah, we go to a lot of vineyards, check out their vines, and taste their wine. Yeah.
And it is like a sommelier class.
Sweet.
So you can grow it
Yeah.
and.
Okay, any other questions before we take a walk up to the greenhouse?
But once I get my
Great,
plants
okay.
going,